Welcome to this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us Christian de la Huerta, spiritual teacher, personal transformation coach, and award-winning author, over 30 years of experience, spoken at TEDx and led transformational retreats around the world. Has written several books, and the latest book is Conscious Love: Transforming Our Relationship to Relationships, and it offers practical tools for healing and deeper connection. Let's dive into the story behind the story. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, AJ. Been looking forward to our conversation.
You're welcome. Welcome once again to the KAJ Masterclass, this time on the Author's Voice with KAJ. So we'll be talking about your book this time. You know, this is the book we'll be talking about. But before that, let's understand a bit about your journey, your writing, because you have written several books. People find it very difficult. How did you tell us a bit about your story, your inspiration towards becoming an author?
Yeah, the first book came out probably 20 years ago, and I totally get it. Like, for my first book was interesting because I was approached by a publisher, a New York publisher, asking me to write a book, and I had an immediate yes, of course, and yikes. I never written a book. I didn't know that I could write a book. And then I had all the layers of self-consciousness about that. Who am I to write a book? What do I have to say for 300 pages? And yet all along knowing that I felt like I had been anointed, sword to the shoulder with a mission type thing. So long story short, I missed my first deadline. They didn't give me enough time. They only gave me 9 months. But because I was struggling in my own self about writing it, I missed the first deadline. So then I got an extension. And I said, well, now I really have to write this book. And what I figured out, the reason that I was getting stuck is that every time I thought I had to write a book, I would freeze. Like I didn't know how to do that. But then my breakthrough was like, the saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And then I thought, you know what? I've never written a book, but I can do term papers. I've done a bunch of term papers in high school and college. And so then I'm just going to focus on one chapter at a time. And I'm going to think of each chapter as a term paper. And that's how I got through my resistance to writing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One chapter at a time. Wonderful inspiration for anyone thinking of writing this book. You've written several books. This is the latest book, Conscious Love, Transforming Our Relationship to Relationship. Tell us about what does this title mean? What is it that you are trying to say here?
Well, I've been doing work, personal transformation, spiritual transformation work for over 30 years. And what I've noticed is that people who've done their work, whether they went through therapy, they have a meditation practice, they've done breath work, the majority of us still struggle in this one area of life with relationships. And why is that? I started asking myself because it didn't make any sense. People that were otherwise very successful professionally and financially in other areas of life, this is what a lot of them still struggled with. And then what I started realizing is that we carry a lot of subconscious conditioned expectations, beliefs about love. Like we haven't been really taught about relationships, about how to even begin to approach them. And so I started thinking that like some of those unrealistic expectations that we have about them is if we're approaching a relationship hoping that it's going to fulfill us, that it's going to validate us, that it's going to give us a sense of meaning and purpose, forget it. And it's just not going to happen. And there isn't anybody out there who's going to make us happy. And it's not their job to. So for me, that's the difference between conscious relationships and unconscious relationships. A conscious relationship, approaching a relationship consciously, means that we know that only we are responsible for our happiness and that nobody else can do that and it's not their job to. then the relationship has a chance, and we can talk about other ways, other areas in which we tend to get stuck in relationships.
Absolutely. So, what's within the book? How have you tackled this subject? Means it sounds easy, but it is not so easy. You are trying to tackle with issue that almost almost the whole of world is facing in one way or the other. Help us understand about that part. What's it is it within the book itself?
You mean how to navigate relationships? How to
Yeah,
figure
what
it out?
how have you discussed this topic within the chapters of your book?
Yeah, I get into 10 different challenges, like which are the areas that we get stuck in, that we are challenged by when we talk about when we approach relationships. So one would be this unrealistic expectations. You know, when we're approaching it, looking for completion, for happiness or validation. Another area that we often get stuck in is that we end up settling for less. Like, how many of us have overridden the red flags? You know, like we, at some level, we knew that the relationship really wasn't a match. And it's not to say that the person is better than or worse than. It's just that we're in different age stages of life. We have different values. And yet, because we fear being alone, we override that inner knowing, that intuition, and we end up settling for something that ultimately is not going to work out. And we end up accepting relationships that aren't going to fulfill us, nourish us, give us what we need, what we're really longing for. Another problem, you know, another one of those 10 challenges is that we end up confusing the feeling of love with the art of loving. And this is from paraphrasing Scott Peck, you know, who wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And it's, you know, we talk about the feeling of love, and we can't really go by that, because sometimes love doesn't feel good. Like the act of loving doesn't feel good. Think about disciplining a child, you know, because the child has had too much sugar, or because it's going to do something that we know is going to get them in trouble, like even like running into a busy street. So we have to like discipline the child, like tell the child no. It doesn't feel good to say no to a child, but it's for their own good. And so if we're not going to go by the feeling of love, like how do we know then what love is? And the way that Scott Peck defines love, it's really interesting. He says that it's when we place ourselves outside of our comfort zone for the sake of the spiritual growth of another person. And I'll say that again because it's deep. When we place ourselves outside of our comfort zone, so we have to place ourselves in some degree of discomfort to stretch ourselves for the sake of the spiritual growth of another person. And that's what he defines as love. And I find that very interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So two things, Christian. How we talk? You talk about expectations in love, relationships, and then you also talk about settling for less. So either they should have expectations, or they will not. And if and the settling part is also your settling for less part. These seem to be two different things in going in two different directions. How should people understand that? How have you discussed all this within the book?
Yeah, each of those topics is discussed in depth in the book. So like each one of those 10 challenges has a chapter to it. So we get into it deeply. And, we don't have a lot of time in this conversation to get into each one of those. But another one, for example, that's very important, that we all often overlook, is that we carry all our unhealed past, all of our old wounds. We drag our past into the present relationship. And if we haven't done our work of getting through this stuff, we end up projecting it onto each other. I have a friend who's also an author, and he talks about how it's really important that we heal a relationship with our parents so that we can stop dating them. And it's funny, but it's true. Because until we work at all the stuff from our past, like think about the heart as the iris of the eye, of the shutter of the camera, the heart chakra, the energy center. If we allow our heart to close to the ex who cheated on us or left us for somebody else, or to mom who did this, or daddy who didn't do that or wasn't there, or to the teacher, the minister, the rabbi, whatever it is, we can't close that heart selectively. If we close it, we close it. And how can we expect the relationship to work if we're approaching it with a closed heart, a heart that isn't fully available for that relationship? And the tragic part about all this, AJ, is that we do this unconsciously, and that we're also trying to find validation for our inherent worth that requires no validation. Our inherent worth is implicit; it is innate. And because we get confused about that stuff, because we have been conditioned not to really love and accept and cherish ourselves, we approach these relationships with that desire for validation and with all this unhealed stuff from our past. And then, of course, how can we expect these relationships to work?
Absolutely. You mentioned about spiritual growth in relationships in love. I thought a lot of relationships, they don't want much of spiritual. They want of, other facilities, other sort of benefits, they want a lot of entertainment, and some people find that without that people are boring, and that is where does this spiritual growth come in? I thought people run away from talks like this, and they look at much more on the commercial side of things, on the entertainment side of things. Help us understand about the spiritual growth part. Means how do you bring that in a relationship when the world is much more looking at the materialistic side of things?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you're right. All of society is guiding us in that direction of buy, and you have to own stuff, and you have to have certain brands over others. And what a superficial way to validate ourselves, depending by how much money we make, or what different belongings we have, or how many houses we have, or how many purses or shoes or whatever it is. What a tragic way to define our worth, our value as human beings. And so for me, the inherent value of being human is connected with that, what I call spiritual. Somebody else may not call that spiritual, and it doesn't have to be labeled as such, but it's beyond the surface level, beyond the superficial, even beyond the physical of what we look like and what kind of features we have and how much melanin is in our skin. That inherent worth, which to me is that soul level, that spiritual level, it requires no validation. We are who we are, and our worth is there just by virtue of being human. And to address it in a different way, like, wouldn't we say that just by virtue of being human, every single one of the 8 billion humans deserves to be loved, deserves to be happy, deserves to have a life that is filled with meaning, with purpose? I think most of us would say that. And so then what makes us so special that we are the only ones in 8 billion who don't deserve to be loved, who don't feel worthy? It doesn't make any sense. And in a sense, it's like reverse arrogance. And to me, that's one of the ways that I use with people that in my retreats, in my coaching relationships, when they're struggling with owning their worth. It's like when I phrase it in that way, as reverse arrogance, is what makes you so special. You're the only one in 8 billion who doesn't deserve to be loved, or who is not worthy. Then it doesn't make sense. It's a bit of a mind fuck. Excuse my French.
Absolutely. So, Christian, looking at all these things that we talked, I wonder, who is this book for?
I'm sorry, AJ, say that again. Who is what?
Yeah, who is this book for? Conscious Love.
spoken for all of us, anybody who can read, anybody who has struggled with relationships, anybody who could use some really practical and insightful way of thinking about ourselves as human beings to begin with. It's going to deepen and expand how we hold ourselves, and it's going to really give them some practical ways of approaching relationships in a way that they can have relationships that really have a chance of working. Because again, if we're approaching a relationship with that expectation that it's going to fulfill us, that it's going to make us happy, that it's going to validate us, forget it. It's not the relationship's responsibility to do that. And so when we approach it knowing that about ourselves, that our worth is inherent, that a relationship is going to have ups and downs, that maybe even, sometimes we're so conditioned to believe that there is one person that we got to look for, the one. And again, there isn't necessarily a one person for each of us. And so to put that expectation that a relationship is till death do us part, it creates a lot of pressure on it. For me, the measure of a relationship, of its success, are both people growing, right? Is growth happening? And, if we're not going to go by the ups and the downs, because sometimes in the downs, we're facing relationship struggles, sometimes growth is happening. So if we're not going to go by the ups and the downs, by the peaks and the valleys, how do we know how long to stay? And for me, the question is growth happening? And if growth is happening, then I'm willing to do the work of relationships. And we all know relationships take work. And it's good work, because a lot of times we can't grow, whether psychologically, personally, spiritually, in a vacuum, right? We need the push and pull of relationships in order to shine a light on those areas within ourselves that are in need of healing. Sort of like that joke about the master who spent decades up in the mountains in a cave. And then when she finally comes out, she's quickly surrounded by villagers. Master, what have you learned? Clears her throat because she hasn't spoken in 30 years. It's like, my children, I have conquered anger. Oh, wow. She conquered anger. Great. What else have you learned? She said, befuddled. 30 years to conquer anger. It's like, I've conquered anger. Yeah. What else have you learned? I've conquered anger. Right? Back to the cave.
Absolutely. So where does the success of relationship lie? Is it in finding the perfect partner, or is it, handling the relationship well, in the journey itself? Where should one look for success?
Exactly what you just said, right? It is in the journey. And of course, we know there is no perfect partner and no perfect relationship. So if we let that stuff go, we can actually focus on what the relationship offers us, which is that opportunity to see those blind spots that I'm never going to see in myself. That's the definition of a blind spot. I'm never going to see it in myself. But boy, can I see it over there in my partner. We can so good about finding each other's flaws and all the mistakes that they make. But if we use the relationship consciously, it's a pretty safe bet that if it's there, it's here as well. And the details might be completely different, but that's a way that we can see our blind spots. And the more that whatever they do gets us, the more that we are triggered and bothered by whatever they do, the clearer the sign that we also do that in some way. And here's an example of that. For some years ago, I was just dating somebody, and suddenly, like, it happened a couple of times, didn't show up for the date, no message, no email, no phone call, nothing. And I didn't understand what was going on. I was focused over there and completely missed the opportunity for my growth because I was focused on, God, what's going on with them? Are they doing? Are they okay? They get fired? What's going on? So I didn't get it. So I had subconsciously, of course, to create a different situation in life so that I would get the lesson. So I was working with a literary agent in New York who was usually great about communications. She'd get back to me within 24, 48 hours. A week goes by and I haven't heard from her. Okay, now that got my attention. Two people, different walks of life, kind of doing the same thing, right? So because it's a blind spot, let's focus first on what they were doing, right? They weren't showing up. They weren't keeping their agreements. They weren't doing what they said they were going to do. So therefore, they were out of integrity, right? I can see it clearly in them. Ooh, if I'm going to turn that mirror around and ask myself, how do I do that? It took me a few days. I did like an inventory of relationships. Am I showing up? Yeah. Am I doing what I said I was going to do? Yes. Am I keeping my agreements? Yes. Am I in integrity with my relationships? Yes. Except it finally hit me in relationship to my own writing. Like, how many times had I said to myself, I'm going to finish that book by such and such a date? Did I do it? No. But was I doing other important stuff? Yes. But I wasn't keeping my agreements with myself in that particular area in relationship to my writings. So same thing, right? It just, the details were different. And I don't have to keep that agreement, right? I can extend the deadline. I can renegotiate the deadline with myself. I can choose not to write the book, not to finish it. But I wasn't doing any of that. I was just kind of doing this subconsciously. So then I had to create these two situations in my life so that I could see, oh, wow, I hadn't even noticed that I was doing that same thing. And once I got aware of that, AJ, like suddenly, like within the hour, they both called. So no longer did I need to create subconscious drama to get to that place of getting the lesson, right? And honor your agreement with yourself, or choose not to, right? But make it conscious, make it clear.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, Christian, what is it that you want? What message, what key insight you want your readers to take away from this book?
Well, the first thing is how to approach relationships, right? And so we've talked already about that, how to approach them in a way that it's conscious, in a way that they have a chance of working. And then the deeper message is expanding about our understanding and our relationship to love itself. So expanding that. And then I would say the third message is to really get who we are, to really honor who we are as human beings, and to realize how worthy we are of love and of having relationships that work.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is much to learn from you about your book. So, any other book that is in the pipeline? Anything else that you want the world to know about?
Well, this book is the second one of a series that is called Calling All Heroes, the series. The first book is called Awakening the Soul of Power. And that's about our relationship to power. Because a lot of us have an ambivalent relationship to power. Part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it. And no wonder, we've been so conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing, with quotes like power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But what they didn't tell us is that Lord Acton, who spoke those words, was speaking specifically about political power, not the personal power. So when we combine that fact, that conditioning about power, with the multiple times that we have witnessed abuses of power, both in our personal lives and out in the world, like all we have to do is turn on the news or read the headlines any given day to witness abuses of power. And what good-hearted person wants to do that, wants to abuse power or wants to be corrupted by power? So what happens is, like, we end up giving our power away. We get confused about the nature of power and the fact that there are different types of power, right? So there's the way that the world looks at power, and there's what I call soulful power or spiritual power. So think of a Gandhi or a Gandalf if you're into the Lord of the Rings, and their simple monastic robes, their sandal feet. From looking at them from the outside, you'd never know how much power they hold until it's necessary, and then get out of the way. Gandhi brought the British Empire to its knees when it was at its highest point in terms of global reach and influence, and he did that without ever shooting a gun or landing a single punch. That's power. And that's the kind of power that's inside each one of us, and we all have access to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is much to learn about all this from your books, Christian, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, also about your books. What's the best way for them to do so?
Thank you for asking that question, AJ. Probably my website is the best way. The website is soulfulpower.com, soulfulpower.com. And from there, they can email me or they can access my social media. And the books are also available on Amazon.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.